Chapter 22, Fungi. Most people don't think about fungi unless an infection occurs or about a meal all around us, but most of them are inconspicuous. So they're around us, but you really don't see them. They're found in the soil, but only noticeable when reproductive structures are above the soil, like you see in the image. We're going to talk about fungal evolution, the structure, growth patterns, reproduction, and most importantly, what's their importance to us, to animals, to plants, etc. Remember, the phylogenetic relationships are determined through data to find a more accurate than data and comparative morphology. So that means we're looking at them, if you would, under a microscope. Kingdom fungi is the oldest and largest of living organisms. It is a monophyletic group, and it's about 800 or so million years of age. Remember that kingdoms were separated because three things occurred. First, by nutrition. And think about it. Animalia engulf. Plants use photosynthesis. And then fungi are a little bit different because they excrete a digestive enzyme and then absorb from the external environment. So nutrition is one. Second is cell membranes. Animalia have cholesterol. Plants have cellulose, and fungi have chitin. The third and final reason for division were the genomes. That was the molecular analysis that showed diversity between plants, animals, and fungi. Fungi are more closely related to Animalia, to animals, because fungi arose from a protist. Remember Opisthokonta. And then also fungi store glycogen as energy. That's just like animals and not starch like plants. To understand fungal evolution onto land, we must know a few things. First, fossil evidence of the mycorrhizae were found. Mycorrhizae formed a relationship with plants within the rhizosphere. The rhizosphere, remember, is the root area. This allowed fungi to follow or move, onto land to be successful. Mycorrhizae and plant roots in the first or earliest demonstration of a vascular relationship. And another adaptation is they are found below soil and less reproduce. Okay. Mycorrhizae, again, remember, they're intertwined with the plant root system, the rhizosphere, which I just talked about. It has a symbiotic relationship with plants. Mostly it's mutualistic, though there are a few examples of parasitic relationships. Plant makes organic substances like glucose, which can be utilized by fungi, and then fungi supply the plant with water and minerals, specifically phosphorus. Fungi colonize plant root system either within, intracellular, or outside, extracellular, and you can see those on the images on the screen. Found almost in every terrain environment, but most are terrestrial. There's over 100,000 species, and they're considered nutritionally heterotrophic absorbers. Remember that they release that digestive enzyme and then absorb what is now externally. Food comes from soil, debris, garbage, whatever is available. This is really cool. The largest living fungus is called the honey fungus, and it colonizes over 2,000 acres. Just kind of cool to show you how big it can be or how large that colony can be. Okay, little FYI, they can be complex multicellular, but some are single-celled. And the fungal spores can be found several feet away from where they originated. For example, one was found over 500,000 feet away from where it was released. Again, some main functional aspects of it is they are decomposers. It is beneficial to the environment. They're used for fermentation, beer, or bread, and they're also used as medicine, antibiotics. Fungi are composed of filaments called hyphae. They're basically threads that are connected end to end. The hyphae are surrounded by high tubular wall made of chitin, which contains nitrogen and polysaccharides. Hyphae grow at tips, which allows fungus to move into new territory. Fungus concentrate energy and resources on the tips of hyphae, allowing for growth. Cytoplasmic streaming and osmosis allows for the hyphae to grow. Water enters, causing hyphal tip to swell, producing enough force for tip extension. Being heterotrophic absorbs play many roles in ecology. A, it can be a decomposer. Fungi break down non-living material. B, it can be parasitic fungi that absorbs nutrients from a living host. Or C, mutualistic, absorbing nutrients from host but giving back something to benefit the host. So what do the hyphae look like? The hyphae of Ascomycetes, which is a phylum, and Basidiomycetes, another phylum, have separate or divided into smaller cellular units by septa. Septa have pores for movement of such things like ribosomes. The lack of septa, which you can see in the image on the top right, they are called coencytic fungi. They are also called aseptate fungi. Septa, remember A in front of it means without, aseptate fungi. Basically, it has continuous cytoplasmic mass with many nuclei. It is not one single hyphae. They make a woven mass called mycelium. Mycelium are very tiny and spread out. They spread out in large numbers, allowing for more absorption. Asexual reproduction with stretching hyphae, sexual reproduction with fruiting bodies. They're non-motile, and the fruiting bodies are easier to see because they come from the substrate. Example, mushrooms. Many fungi only reproduce asexually. They have a natural cloning process. Genetically identical organisms are produced. Asexual is with conidia, which are spores from the tip of the hyphae. They land, germinate, and form adult, then produce more conidia. These spores would be identical to the parent. Again, a natural cloning process. A second way of asexual is by mycelial fragmentation. Mycelial disperse, it breaks into two pieces, if you would pieces, and each makes a new mycelium, which you can kind of see it's starting to occur in the top right picture. The third and final way for reproduction is by budding. That is where a new fungus is growing off of the old fungus, and then it breaks apart. Any fungi that don't do sexual reproduction are called deuteromycetes. Okay. 20% of fungal reproduction is asexual, and two specific examples of that would be mold, which is rapid growing myceliose, and produce haploid spores. Primarily asexual, but can reproduce sexually if it encountered a different mating type, an opposite strand. They are not photosynthetic. In fact, UV radiation will inhibit growth. They receive nutrition from what they are on. The second one is yeast. Unicellular. They like liquid environments. They're facilitated anaerobes. Basically facilitated anaerobes. Those are going to ferment sugar for energy, and anaerobe, they do not require oxygen. No spores are produced. They reproduce by simple division or budding, and they never produce mycelium. Fungal sexual reproduction involves union of gametes with meiosis. It's different than plants because there is no alteration of generation. It begins when the hyphae from two genetically distinct mycelia release sexual chemicals called pheromones. The pheromones binds to the opposite partner's surface, causing the hyphae to move towards each other. When they meet, they fuse, allowing for genetic variation. Think about human reproduction and nuclei moving, if you would, anaphase, telophase, metaphase, prophase. For fungi, mycelia contain coexisting genetically distinct nuclei called heterokaryon. These can mingle, if you would, and exchange chromosomes or genes. The sexual life cycle is one of two. Plasmogamy is cytoplasmic fusion of cells. Karyogamy is the fusion of haploid nuclei contributed by two parents. Sexual reproduction leads to very diverse fungi, color, odor, produces reproductive spores by meiosis or mitosis. Fungal spores adapt to transportation, animals and wind. Fungal spores land in a favorable environment and produce mycelia. New mycelia, sexual reproduction, fruiting body, spores back to new mycelia. It's a cycle. Some things you can see, there's puffballs, there's something called bird's nests, and then stinkhorns, which offer variation. Microsporidia, once believed to be protists, we now know they're not. They're restricted to animal host. The host can be an insect, crustacean, fish, even humans. 10% are parasites of vertebrates, including humans, and they can cause microsporidosis, which is causing diarrhea and wasting. This reproduction only will happen in animal cells. Zygospore fungi has a diploid reproductive stage in one of the life cycles. It's created by nuclear fusion in budding structures. It has mitotic and meiotic life stages. It survives on the remain of plants, animals, and food. For example, bread, which you can see at the top left. Arbuscular mycorrhiza, or also known as AM fungi, is a primitive fungi. It is a symbiotic fungi which penetrates cortical cells in the roots of vascular plants. This penetration forms arbucelles. Arbucelles aid in getting micronutrients in the soil and provide those nutrients to plants, including phosphorus and nitrogen. This is a mutualistic relationship between plants and AM fungi. AM fungi can be used to cure constipation, hemorrhoids, and help with coagulation of blood clotting. Ascomycetes, also known as sac fungi, is a fungus whose spores develop within asci. Ascus is a sexual structure in which non-motile spores are allowed to develop. This is symbionts to lichens. It is a monophyletic group based on both morphological, what it looks like, and physiological, what it contains, analysis by DNA. It is important for several things: medicine and food. The economic value for both AM fungi and Ascomycetes: baking, brewing, fermentation, pickling foods, alcoholic beverages. Basidiomycetes, also known as club fungi, are the second large division that, with Ascomycetes, make up subkingdom Dicaria. It includes mushrooms, puffballs, chanterelles, stinkhorns, etc. Also includes human pathologic yeast, Cryptococcus, filaments fungi made of hyphae and reproduce sexually by Basidia. Basidia are found on fruiting bodies. That's what you see above the soil. Can be obligate asexual reproducers under certain conditions. Obligate means constrained. Poisonous mushrooms, basically red and yellow amanitis. They have toxins that reduce or induce similarities of severe intoxication. So the toxins released by the mushroom that you see can cause hallucinogenic stupors like bad drunk. The ones you see on the left are called death cap mushrooms. 90% of fatalities from fungi consumption come from this. Shrooms, which I hope none of you know about, are a hallucinogenic chemical called psilocybin. It gives a reaction very similar to LSD. Lichens are the link between fungi and photosynthetic algae or plants. For example, cyanobacteria or algae. Simple, very slow-growing plants. They arise from algae or that cyanobacteria. They live among filaments within many fungi species. Having a mutualistic relationship. They come in different colors, sizes, forms. They are not plants. They are found from sea level to high elevations. 6% of Earth's surface are covered by these lichens. They can reproduce sexually, but some lost the ability because of self-contained mini ecosystem. They live for a very long time, and they're one of the first things to grow on fresh rock exposed by an event. They can be sexual or asexual in reproduction. There can be a symbiosis with lichens and plants. Structurally, it aids in getting more sun, so it's advantageous. It also allows for nitrogen in soil. Example, lichens will release nitrogen. Rain binds with that nitrogen in the soil. Now it's available for plants. Lichens are important with animals and humans because they have high carbohydrates and low protein, therefore utilized for energy, and they have a small amount of water in case there's a need. They also have a symbiotic relationship with algae and cyanobacteria. They protect it from the environment and supply it with food. They can cause disease to crops. They have that symbiotic relationship with bacteria and can potentially work with that bacteria to be immune to fungicides and then aid the bacteria to be immune from bactericides. It can be pathologic to humans. You can have thrush, which is that white stuff. It's a mouth disease or larynx disease or even tracheal disease. You can have ringworm, which is a direct contact fungal infection that grows in rings and has a scaled appearance. Athlete's foot, again from direct contact. These things, the athlete's foot and ringworm, if they are not taken care of, or at least you're giving something to get rid of it, it'll increase in size and severity. And there's this one thing I like to talk about. It's something called zombie ants. Basically, it's a fungus that affects a particular strand, a particular type of carpenter ants. It invades ants, grows, dies, and then the fungus is left and it bursts through the surface of the ant. Now it releases more spores to hopefully disrupt the full colony. Something called ergot. It's a fungal disease found in cereals. It's basically elongated black fruiting bodies. It is unsafe, high risk of poisoning, and it can be fatal. There is a medical use to it. It's used to treat bleeding during menstruation, causing the uterus to contract. Fungi has a commercial importance. It's used for food. There's several reasons in different types, and there's several elevated forms. For example, truffles, which you see at the top, very expensive, and they're utilized not just for food itself, but making food. Medicine, antibiotics. If I can grow a strand of bacteria and figure out how to stop that growth of bacteria, then we can make an antibiotic. Phylum Chytrids, the name comes from the structure. It contains unreleased zoospores, which are asexual spores with a flagella, which you can see in the images below. It's unicellular. It has a chitin cell wall. That flagella is found in the posterior area of it, which you can see in the image. They prefer aquatic environments, and they absorb nutrients. Saprobic, heterotrophs, and they store glycogen for energy. They can be parasitic. Phylum Microsporidia, unicellular parasites for animal hosts. There's over 1 million species. Spores infect the host and prefer insects. They're opportunistic and therefore can infect humans. Spores can last without a host or hibernate for several years. They invade all tissues and organs. For example, it can cause an intestinal infection. Phylum Zygospore, fungi. There's over 1,000 species. It prefers a terrestrial environment. They have symbiotic relationships with plants, but they also can be parasitic with plants, insects, and animals. Spores can be formed both by sexual and asexual reproductive. Before germination, a spore is dormant. That means it metabolizes very slow and can survive hours or years.